I'm sorry, Jordan. Can we just stop? Um, Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show. It's great to be back with you again for yet another week. This is episode 618, believe it or not. We've been going for quite a long time, and this is the show that really cares about us stepping up and doing good through our business, through our endeavors, or our social enterprises, and contributing to a better world through our work and using our energy really well to make a real difference while we're here. And I've got another fantastic guest with you today. And before I introduce you to Ra, I'd just like to say I had a holiday in Portugal last week. So we took a little break and replayed a show for you. But the week before, I had Paul Dutoit from Johannesburg, who's an incredible speaker, one of the top speakers in South Africa. He's a great friend as well. He inspired me originally to write my first book and held me to account for doing so. And his latest book was about influence and takes, you're probably aware of the sort of Cialdini book on influence, but this really brings influence up to the modern day, doing it in a really, really authentic and appropriate way. So great conversation with Paul. If you're interested in how do I influence and utilize it authentically to do more good in the world, then do check out that interview from the archive. So, to today's show. My guest, Rha Goddess. We're going to talk about her fantastic new book, Intentional Ambition, redefining your work for greater joy, freedom, and fulfillment. And in this world right now, doesn't it feel right that we look at what we're doing and look to contribute to solutions and not contribute to the problems? And that can lead us to feeling really unsettled sometimes in ourselves. And it's ambition, it can lead us to striving, can't it? But also to burnout and compromise. But what if your working life could be joyful? If it could be purposeful and actually reflects who you truly are? So today we're going to talk to Rha Goddess. She's an entrepreneurial soul coach and author. She's founder of Move the Crowd. And we're going to talk about how to align purpose, prosperity, and impact through her concept and her new book, Intentional Ambition. We'll be discussing too how she's galvanizing a movement of 3 million entrepreneurs. Because I'm going to bring to you people on this show who are doing good out there and actually taking action to inspire us to step up. And she's reimagining work as a vehicle for creative expression, financial freedom, and societal transformation. Isn't it great if we can have financial freedom, but we can be contributing to society's transformation too? For over 3 decades, I can't believe she doesn't look that old to be have worked for 3 decades, but clearly I'll be looking at, I don't say how many years I've been working now. I'm into the 3 decades too. Ra's helped changemakers, cultural visionaries, and social entrepreneurs stay true, get paid, and do good. She's been redefining success at the intersection of values and vitality. So let's talk about something meaningful today. Let's talk about redefining your work for greater joy, freedom, and fulfillment. So a big welcome to my guest today, to Rha Goddess.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
You're very welcome. We should thank our mutual friend as well, Dov Baron, for introducing us.
Kisses, Dev, wherever you are.
Yeah, Ra's blowing you kisses at the moment if you can't see the recording, because we're actually on YouTube now. You can also listen to the on YouTube and watch them, so you actually see us. So that means I've got to make sure I'm smart as well each episode. Um, so so let's find out a little bit about you, Ra. Could you tell us a bit about where's home for you? Where do you live?
Yes, so I am a native New Yorker, born and raised just outside of the city. And I love to describe myself as a change of life baby born into the intersection of civil rights and hip hop. So what that means is that my parents were born in the 1920s, and they had me when they were in their 40s. And so I feel like I had a very special opportunity in that they witnessed a lot of history firsthand. And I got,
Yeah.
as a young child growing up, I had the opportunity to actually have firsthand narratives of what it was to be moving in our society at the time, that all of the kinds of changes and upheavals and restructuring has happened. And, Chris, now it almost feels like every 2 years we're in some other kind of major era or upheaval or swirl,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
state of our world. And I know we'll talk a lot about that when we get there, um, but they were very, very passionate about three things: family, community, and education. And they really felt that, if we ever had any opportunity or advantage, that we had responsibility to make a way for other people. And they really instilled that in us. I was the youngest of four. I was a bossy little one, but I was the youngest of four. And I had the opportunity to really absorb their wisdom at a very, very young age, and took the values and ethos to heart, because they didn't just talk about it. They actually lived it. Like, you never knew
Right.
who was going to show up at the kitchen table. You never knew when my mom would come in and ask for clothes, to be able to share or give, or to allow somebody who was staying with us as a safe haven or sanctuary to have something to wear. You never knew what was going to show up. And so those things made a real impact on me as a young person.
Sounds like there's a lot of kindness then in your household.
Yeah. Yeah. And commitment. I think, I think about their journey often, and particularly they're long gone now. God bless them both. But I think about what it must have been to grow up in a society where the very basic necessities and courtesies were things that you had to fight for.
Mm.
And the degree to which it created a sense of deep, I think, gratitude and compassion. So even more than just saying that they were kind people, I would say that my parents were very compassionate people, because they knew what it was to be on the outside looking in.
Mm. And I suppose we look at this period of history right now with enormous transformational change. But if your parents are born in the 20s, they experienced that too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 2 decades of Jim Crow segregation. My mom born in the South, my dad born in the North. And so those experiences were very, very real. My father fought in the Korean War in the 1950s.
Really?
And I come from a family where literally every generation of men in my family have served. And people are kind of awestruck, right? Because they sort of think, sometimes based upon our beliefs or based upon what we espouse, that there's a particular history that we come from. And the truth of the matter is, literally every generation of the men in my family have served. And as a matter of fact, my nephews are currently serving. And so, when we think about it from that perspective, and we think about it from the perspective of an evolving society, because when my father served in the Korean War, he couldn't sit at lunch counters. He couldn't travel at the front of the rail car. This was a very different lived experience that I think gave this perspective and desire to want to see more people thrive and achieve their
Mm.
very, very best.
Mm. Yeah, there's something I haven't served, but there's something that I see in ex-military personnel who've gone on to do significant things, is that ability to get into action very quickly,
Mm,
and make things happen. There's less time sitting on the fence
mm,
sometimes. Once they feel
mm.
that urge, or they find
Yeah,
that North Star. Some of
yeah,
them, some of them are
yeah,
lost when they come out, but some of them really gone to do some great things.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's so much to say there, but I think the conviction, like my father really was a man of values and morals and conviction. And I feel like that was one of his greatest gifts to me.
And what did he do for work?
My father was an attorney.
Was he?
He was.
Mm.
So, I think he took the values of our founding nation, and I'm from the United States, and I know we're in a context of a global audience. But I think he took the values of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights very seriously. And I think, if you dig into American history even more so, and you have the opportunity to really study and understand the history, particularly of African Americans who went through the experience of chattel slavery, um, that there was a conviction in what was written in the Constitution and what was written in the Bill of Rights that actually fueled their desire for liberation and freedom and emancipation, right? In other words, they believed the founding fathers
Yeah.
when they said that every person has the right, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of something greater. And I think my father definitely took that to heart. And I think his choice to then move into law and to become a litigator was very much rooted in this commitment and this conviction to want to see a sense of fairness and to want to see a sense of equity and wanting to see a sense of belonging on the part
Mm,
of all citizens.
mm. So thinking about your kind of work path, how did that inspire you to, where you're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always, because of who they were, I was always active in community. And, whether that, if I look at my mother, who I describe as a more traditional Southern belle, that included like singing in the church choir, that included like, being present for all the bake sales. And so being very, very active in community in lots of different ways. And yes, she was always volunteering my sisters and my brother and I, my brothers and my sister and I, for all kinds of things. But there was always this lens through which they really looked at how to make the lives of everyday people better, how to make the lives of hardworking everyday people better. And I think they were hardworking. I think they understood that reality really well and deeply. And so even in the ways that they engaged in community, it was really about creating this sense of belonging. And it was about creating this sense of progress and thriving and achievement. And that was very much at the foundation of my shaping and creating in terms of the things that I was passionate about as a young person. And so, being very active in community as a young person, also artistic for me. And I know we'll talk more about that
Mm.
in a minute, but I had a very wonderful creative life, both as a adolescent growing up, but also as an adult. I had a professional life as an artist. And I feel like that, you know, that freedom and that passion for the arts was also part of what I inherited from them.
So tell us a little bit then about your artistry and experience.
Yeah, so I had the privilege of many years spending time in the world of hip hop. So I said this intersection of civil rights and hip hop. And as I
Yeah.
was a young person coming of age, I lived, 15 minutes from Bronx River. And for those who know the history of hip hop and the genesis of hip hop and Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash, I mean, I could go
Mm.
on and sort of name all of the groups. Very much as I think, Chris, in terms of the UK, the seminal moment that the Beatles, right,
Mm.
kind of came to the fore and gave a voice to a generation. I think this was very much the case for us in the genesis of hip hop, and feeling like there was a way in which young people who lived in urban cities and inner cities and urban areas were able to create tools of expression that then became noticeable and recognizable, and then ultimately enrolling of the entire world. And so we never thought it was going to get to the stage that it has been. Hip hop is celebrating 52 years now. Just crazy as an
Really?
art form,
Wow.
right? Very much like if you think about rock and roll is
Mm.
celebrating what now? 70 years, right? 60 or
Mm.
70 years as an art form. And we know the degree to which it influenced culture, the way that we think about things, the way that we approach our world, the way that we, more than just the way that we wear our hair or our clothes, that there are internal perspectives and ways of thinking. And I think this idea of that you can create something from nothing, this idea um, that you can dream and imagine and envision a world and really work to make that world a reality was very much for me embedded in the ethos of hip hop.
And were
And
you a
so
performing hip hop artist then?
Oh, I
Oh.
started performing in junior high school. We used to bang on the lunchroom tables and kind of hold the beat, and then we would write rhymes. And but I was always, I think for me, fascinated with words. I was always, and I think that's part of why I am still a writer today. I was always fascinated with the way that people could be moved and motivated and inspired by the spirit of music, but also by the lyrics of music and the way that we sing songs even now, and the way that songs have a way of marking time for us. You know, when we hear certain songs, we're automatically transported to particular eras and aspects of our life. And I think for me, it was very much that. But I also will say, you know, as a young person, I had a lot of angst, as most teenagers do.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it became a vehicle for expression for me, for being able to work through emotions or being able to work through challenges or being able to work through what I was perceiving in the world and the way that I felt that it was impacting my reality. And so hip hop gave me an outlet for all of that.
Mm. And you would just also, your career took you, you describe yourself as an activist and a soul coach. So tell us a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about
So the work I do
that doing.
today, right,
Yeah.
which is also again so much of what has been in the formative DNA of my work has been this intersection of creativity and culture and community and spirit. And at a very young age, because of again who my parents were, I took a lot of roles of leadership. You know, so I was leading in the youth choir. I was leading in, you know, our local community organizing groups where we used to go door to door and knock on people's doors to get petitions signed, to get candidates on ballots. I mean, I was doing this at 8 and 9 and 10 and, you know, palm
Right.
watching and poll carding and all of those kinds of things. And so, um, you know, my work as a soul coach now, an entrepreneurial and organizational soul coach now, is really about understanding at a fundamental level what enables great leadership to thrive, what enables people to rise in their full potential, and what are the things that challenge our full potential. And having had the perspective of both being able to look at that from a grassroots community organizing perspective, then having the privilege to artistically tour the world and engage with communities and companies and organizations through the work of hip hop, and others being an ambassador and a cultural envoy for the State Department. You know, this is what I mean. Like, there's just so many ways
Mm.
in which my work in the culture took me to all different points of the world and gave me the opportunities to sit at the table with all kinds of people. I also, in my work, both in the frontline community organizing work and my artistic work, worked in prisons. And so, you know, whether I was sitting in Ivory Tower in Manhattan, right, in the sort of the C-suite, or whether I was sitting in a, you know, sort of common room in a detentional facility, I found that the challenges and opportunities that enable people to either thrive or stumble were the same. And so, you know, I believe it's about being on the front lines of humanity, right? And so it's always been that for me. So, as a soul coach, as an organizational, you know, change agent, as a entrepreneurial, you know, social impact strategist, it's always about looking, how do we support people in doing work that is meaningful? How do we support people in doing work that really makes a difference, right? Local or global. And how do we help people come into the fullness of themselves so that their capacity to contribute is expanded and grown as a result?
Mm. So that sounds like incredible work, and what a a smorgasbord of experience. And I can see those other experience, some of those experiences, and your parental upbringing, has come together into what you're doing today. But have you, this book, Intentional Ambition, helping people to redefine their work for greater joy and freedom and fulfillment. Can you, from a personal perspective, have you actually been through that journey yourself of feeling unfulfilled and
100.
and needing to make that pivot and that change? Because what you described is a fascinating and enthusiast, a passionate journey of a multitude of different experiences from community to traveling the globe, and it all sounds very exciting. But I wondered, have you had those moments yourself where this book becomes particularly poignant?
Very much so, and I would say different points of inflection in my life and
Mm,
my journey, right? And I want to speak about it from the sort of more traditional perspective, and then I want to speak about it from the change agent living your purpose perspective. My first book and certainly the core of our work at Move the Crowd for the last 15 years has really been about focusing on helping people find their passion and their purpose in a way that's profitable. And that was really the impetus for the first book, The Calling. But what I'll say about this particular book was, for me, the last major meltdown I had was in 2017. And my joke is sort of like I quit before the pandemic, right? Where I was going through the death of my father. My father passed away at the end of 2016, and it was a very difficult journey, the last particularly 4 or 5 months of his life. And my sister and I, and all of my caretakers out there, you know what this is. When you're
yeah,
holding someone through the final stages of life, it becomes all consuming.
yes.
And my dad, as you could already hear, you all know, is my everything. He was my everything.
Mm,
And rather than taking the time to grieve his death, I threw myself into work. I was in a brand new company. It was budding, it was growing, there was opportunities. I was expanding my team. We were in massive collaborations with new clients and customers, and I just utilized the opportunity to pile it on and really avoid dealing with how I was feeling about having lost someone who I'd spent the last 2 decades caring for.
mm,
Um, and in addition to all of the demands and the commands of work and the team, I had all kinds of stuff in the family go on. And many of us know this as well, is that when people pass, there will be drama or there can be
yeah,
drama. And
yeah.
certainly we had our fair share, right? And again, as the responsible one in the family, I'm leaning in and trying to make sure everybody is taken care of and everybody's voice is heard and concerns are met. And I'm doing this everywhere, Chris, right? And just piling it on and piling it on and piling it on. And then in August of 2017, we had an experience in the United States where there was a group in Charlottesville, Virginia called Unite the Right, who came to the town to protest the taking down of commemorative statues in history. And this has been a controversial movement that was happening in our country. And it squared off, unfortunately, and it got violent. And we woke up on the morning of August 12th, and one of the protesters on the Unite the Right side mowed down a protester on the other opposing side. And I had a member of my team who was from that city and who had actually grown up on the street where Heather Henley was mowed down. And that individual on my team kind of squared off with another individual on my team who had a bit of an opposing view, and it was ugly. And somehow I thought, even running on fumes and being overextended, that I could hold this conflict as well. Well, needless to say, by September 10th, one half of my team wasn't speaking to the other half of my team, and by October 10th, I couldn't get off the couch.
Mm,
And I've known myself to be someone who's very ambitious. I've known myself to be raised to be an overachiever, and because of sort of all of what had been poured into the DNA of my formative years, was a kind of like, no excuses, you just get it done, you do what it takes. And I had not ever confronted this level of really being debilitated and burnt out. And of course, now we understand and we've got all kinds of language for it. Um, but nothing would move me. And there was a point where I remember looking at my husband and saying, I'm not okay. And I said, I think I need help. And it was really through reaching out to a therapist and a coach, and through an 18-month really reconstructing process, deconstructing and then reconstructing process, that I began to really understand all of the things that had been poured into my ambition, for better or worse. And it was what began this inquiry into recognizing that many of us are grappling with our relationship with work and the way that we work,
yeah,
and the degree to which it's begging in this moment, I think, to be renegotiated.
yeah. Well, I think that's a beautiful point, actually, to to sort of come to an end with this segment before we go to a very short commercial break, that idea of renegotiating your work and really thinking about it carefully if you're in that moment where point in time where something just doesn't quite feel right and you maybe don't understand what that is. What are the steps and the journey that we have to go to? So after the break, we'll be talking about renegotiating your work life, and about we'll be talking about the great renegotiation. We're talking about things like using joy as your North Star, which I think is really important aspect, and bringing your whole self to this new level, new focal point around your work, and redefining your success. Because sometimes we can define our success based on the amount of dollars, or the amount of pounds, or euros, or whatever we're earning, but actually we can be miserable doing it, and we might not be doing the good in the world. So, is it about money? What's the relationship with money?
Yeah,
You know,
there
um,
are some there are some things that we have discovered coming out of the last 5 years
yeah,
post pandemic, and I can't wait to talk more with you
yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Excellent. So important part coming in the second half. So if I were you, if you're interested in the subject, it's very relevant to you. Maybe if you're sitting still, take a pad out and a piece of paper, and identify two or three key points, some gold nuggets that you can maybe take away and work upon. We'll be back with you again in just a couple of minutes. Do join us after the break. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. You're listening to the Business Elevation Show with my guest today, Rha Goddess, and we've been talking about Ra's journey, really, to her journey to intentional ambition, and how this came about, and why this is a deeply personal book for Ra. She talked a bit about what was going on with her experiences with her father back in 2016, and then we got to the pandemic, which was very a real paradigm shift for many, many people when it came to their work. So, Ra, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you learned from that experience with the pandemic and the shift in terms of people's perspective around work, and over the last 5 years that brought you to this book.
Yeah. When I had my meltdown and really had to, as I affectionately say, take my work ethic back to the studs, I had no clue that I was actually walking a path that I was going to see mirrored in our world, less than 2 years later.
Mm.
Right. And I think because of my own experience of looking at what was driving me and what was forcing me or causing me to feel like I couldn't stop or I couldn't take a break, or what was exactly I was reaching for. Like, these were all of the big questions that sort of came up in the center of my meltdown. I began to notice, and I think become even more aware, Chris, of what was happening in the context of our society. And I think a bit of a precursor to where I think we wound up going in 2021 and 2022 was really what happened in the unraveling of the Me Too movement in 2018.
Mm.
And I remember I was in the process of my own rehabilitation at that time. And I remember watching an interview with Terry Crews, who is a former NFL athlete turned actor. And he was sharing about an incident that happened with him and an agent in Hollywood. And I remember a senator asking him at the time, you're a big guy. Why didn't you just beat him up? And and he sat back and he reflected and he said, and he started to sort of say something, but you could tell he was censoring himself. And she said to him, say it plain. And he said, as a Black man in America, you only get so many shots. And I'd watched men in my community, was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. Said I watched men in my community be provoked and either wind up dead or in prison. He said, and my wife sort of said to me, if you're ever provoked, do not retaliate. And he said, she trained me. And he said, thank God, because in that moment, her training worked. And it was a moment for me where I began to ask, what is it that success is demanding of us that is a little bit more than just hard work and sort of pedestrian sacrifice? Like, where is success demanding flesh?
Yeah.
And to what degree are we in touch with that, recognizing that, understanding that? And that really became the impetus for the book. And so, through the pandemic, what I observed, particularly as we got to the point of the Great Resignation, where in 2021 and 2022, you see, 100 million people, right, leaving, was that we had hit our tolerance threshold. And no matter what we were working on, we were recognizing that we're engaged in a system of work that wasn't working. And it was important for me in that realization because I was doing what I loved and I still burnt out. So that forced me to have to interrogate the relationship and the how and what were the values and the ethos that were driving my ambition. What we've discovered through, in writing the book, I had the privilege to sit with lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And also, obviously, in the context of the work that I do, supporting leaders in every sector and being on the front lines of their ambition, right, was that we were all in an exploration of reprioritizing what success meant to us. So pre-pandemic, our health, we might tend to it, we might not, in the name of success, right? Our happiness, certainly, we might or we might not. Our sense of meaning, we might or might not. And those were the three big shifts I saw. In other words, people are now prioritizing or recognizing that their health is the foundation for anything else they want to be doing. Yeah. Mental, spiritual, emotional health, foundation for anything they want to be doing. And that we actually no longer have the luxury of ignoring our health and well-being, especially when we look at the sort of epidemic proportion of anxiety and all of the other kinds of things that came out. People who are still walking around with long COVID. I mean, there's so many sort of places where we can point to this frontier, this, sort of universal laboring of burnout and stress and fatigue, which for a lot of people is actually trauma, right? So our mental, spiritual, emotional, physical health, no longer a luxury. Our happiness, no longer a luxury. And this speaks to the point, Chris, that I feel you so eloquently raised, which is money is important, but it isn't everything. And I think there is a way in which we turn to money pre-pandemic as the balm, as the soothing balm for our ability to tolerate a lot of toxicity that I feel that we are no longer willing to tolerate at the same level. And again, it doesn't mean that money is not important, but it is no longer the most important thing. There is a way in which people are really asking themselves really important questions that relate to their happiness
Yeah.
and their joy. And that's about the quality of their day to day,
Yeah.
right? Because the quality of your life is the quality of your day to day,
Yeah.
right? There's this famous quote, right? How you spend your days is how you spend your life. And then this third shift, which is about purpose and meaning, very much about the things that you and I care about, which is, am I doing work that is meaningful to me? Am I spending my time or my energy in ways that are meaning to me? And this is about fulfillment. Do I feel like at the end of the day that I'm contributing in ways that really, really matter? And I think that these are the three central shifts that are sitting at the center of our desire and very active process of renegotiation right now,
Yeah.
which is all about new terms and conditions.
Yeah. Remember when I went through the leaving corporate world myself, and founding initially co-founded an entrepreneurial venture which did well, and we exited from that after a few years. But then a relative said to my wife, she said, "How do you feel about being married to somebody who was highly paid and has thrown it all away?" And she said, "But he's happy." And and it felt like in that moment, I remember my mother ringing up and actually asking me, what's he doing? Well, he's and asking the kids, and they said, well, he seems to be in his office pressing buttons, on the keyboard. They were very little at the time, but what's he doing? Um, but it felt a uncertain world. But once you move out of that machine, there's a machine, isn't there, which you can very much become a part of, and the culture of, and the environment's about productivity. And you mentioned that in your
Yeah,
book. And there's
yeah,
just more productivity and output. You become part of that machine, and it can become debilitating. And I hit a wall myself.
100%. And it is a wall, Chris.
It
It's
is.
exactly what you're saying. And a lot of times we think it's a career wall, but it really is a life wall
Yeah. Yeah.
because there is a way, no matter even what we wind up doing, that we can carry that with us
Mm,
and not realize it, right?
yeah.
Because we've been taught that our value or self worth is connected to what we do,
Yeah.
right? Or how much we make, or where we live, or what we drive. And so we become so externally focused to ensure that we achieve that level of respectability, which is really about that level of acceptability, right? Because we know, you and I both know, what we're striving always for is belonging,
Mm,
that sense of respect and appreciation. We want to be seen, we want to be valued, we want to be acknowledged as somebody. And our work has been so much of the primary driver
yeah.
of how that is weighed and measured.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the kind of principles in the book. You talk about um, being wounded versus true ambition. Maybe we could start with that one. That's an interesting
Yeah.
frame.
When I dug to the bottom of my own pile of ambition, I was really shocked to find what was all in there, meaning how much of my life had really been lived in service to other people's expectations,
Yeah.
in service to wanting to make other people proud, in service to wanting to prove that I was worthy or that I deserved a certain opportunity. And how much I was living for somebody else, and in some cases living for people who couldn't care less about me,
Yeah.
right? And who maybe would never ever see me in the way I wanted them to see me, or who would never maybe ever respect me or treat me in the way that I wanted to be treated. um, and I think, the lineage and the legacy of what my parents endured and what they had to uh, do in order to fight against or survive against that kind of treatment, became the sort of baseline expectation for what I needed to do. And I'm going to say more about this because many of us, whether we come from maybe our parents, we're the first ones in our family to go to college, first ones in our generation, right, to go to
Mm,
college, or maybe we're the first ones to work in a corporate organization, or maybe we're the first ones to in our family who arrive in a new land. to speak English, right? Or whatever that sort of native language of that land is, and actually attempt to navigate the systems and structures of success, right? But we carry those ethos with us, meaning our parents often endured so much hardship that we don't feel like we have a right to complain, even when things are painful,
Yep.
even when things are toxic, even when things get debilitating. Like, who am I to complain? Right? My father came to this country with $2, or my grandmother scrubbed floors, or and this is a universal global conversation, right? Is that, when we think about those who've come before us, that it's, chin up, right?
Mm.
Like, you don't have a right to complain. You suck it up and make the best of it. And it's your job to do better and make it better. And unfortunately, there is a way in which those narratives can transmute into dysfunction, and a way that we abandon ourselves, and a way that we neglect ourselves, and a way that we tolerate things that are really, really harmful, because we believe that that is what we have to do. And oh, by the way, what we're dealing with is a walk in the park compared
Yep.
to what those who come before us have taught us,
Mm.
right? So we've got that in there that we're trying to navigate and work through. And that's wounding, right? Which is where we're wanting things that, there's two levels of it, right? So I say there's wounding in the desire, right? In other words, we're wanting things that we don't even really want. We're wanting things on behalf of auntie or grandmama or daddy, or, what society says, or what our neighbors, for keeping up with our neighbors. We call it in the States, keeping up with the Joneses. If we're wanting to keep score, right, we're aspiring and being driven again by all of these external factors. And it may not really be what we want, but it's what we've been taught to want, if we wanted to be accepted, if we want to be respected, if we want to be seen as somebody, if we want to be successful in the way that it's externally defined.
Yeah.
And then I talk about wounding and the desire, which is that part of what is actually required of us in order to succeed. In other words, what is the price of admission for success? And all of the narratives that may cause us to stretch beyond what is reasonable or beyond what is sustainable to achieve, because of all the things I've talked about, right? This narrative, whether we come from an immigrant background or a chattel slavery background, or a background of just economic hardship, or a background of alienation, and any other kinds of ways, because there are certainly ways in which wealthy families also experience their version of this, right? No matter where you come from, it's in there, right?
Mm.
And this way that we're defining success based upon somebody else's terms and conditions, right? And I describe that first part, and this is the first section of the book, where I call that negotiation as in navigation,
Yes.
right? Coming to the table, somebody else's terms and conditions, right? And our job is to just be able to figure out how to get through the maze, right? And keep a good face on it, right? Then there is the wall that we hit, which is the resignation wall. And I describe it as resignation 1.0, 2.0. 1.0 is, well, this is just the way it is. Like, we internally give up. We allow our apathy to take over, right? And we are just going through the motions. And for many of us, we can spend the rest of our lives there. In
Mm.
other words, just continuing to butt up against the wall, and and kind of on autopilot, and not really thinking about, or even considering the potential of happiness and fulfillment as even being anything that's attainable. Also, because we've got a lot of responsibility. We've got mouths to feed. We've got to put shelter right over heads. We've got to put clothes on back. We're certainly, the propensity to lean into resignation can be high. But then there's resignation 2.0, which is, I call, the peace out quitting kind of resignation, which is enough is enough. And whether you leave a situation, or whether you just wake up a day and sort of say, it's got to be different, it is a point of awakening where you actually have the potential to forge a new path or do it in a different way. And once we come to that place of resignation, and we take the leap and we quit, or we say no more, we actually go through a period of grieving,
Mm.
because so much of our identity, so much of our world has been shaped by these externally focused values and conditions and standards. But the grieving is important.
Yeah, and at that point, you refer to the great renegotiation. Is that where that comes in at that point? Maybe you want to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
focus in a little bit on the renegotiation.
I was going to say, so that then
Mm.
takes us to the renegotiation,
Yeah.
right? Our willingness to go through that process and allow ourselves to feel that sense of almost dying to the old self in order to kind of be born again to a new opportunity and a new reality. So the steps of renegotiation are threefold. The first step is what I call reclaim. And that's all about what are the new stories we want to tell? What are the new definitions we want to create around our own success? What are the new ways we want to be ignited and inspired in terms of our ambition? So we go from wounded ambition to true ambition, which is what's really going to fulfill us, what's really going to enable us to experience joy in our work and that sense of autonomy and freedom that enables us to bring our best. And in the reclaiming, we're asking, whose story is it? And that we then become the architects and the writers of our own story. And we recognize that we're creating and writing that story in real time.
Mm.
And that no matter where we were yesterday, that we have an opportunity to architect differently today. And we get to create narratives that fuel and empower that opportunity. The second step is realigning. So we reclaim new story, new narrative. We come home to ourselves. We really embrace the truth of who we are. In realigning, we look at what's working and what's not working. And we tell the truth about what really matters to us. And we begin to realign in service to our values. We realign in service to what matters. And that's where we take the place, we take a pause and we take a step back and we assess and we tell the truth to ourselves. And then we go to work. We double down on the things that are giving us energy and life and vibrancy. And we begin to look at how we transition and release and let go of the things that don't. And then the third step of renegotiation is reimagination. And this is where, in support of the new narrative, in support of doing the things that bring you joy and give you life and energize you and invigorate and inspire you, what does it look like? What does your optimum work experience look like? And what are the possibilities that you could create for yourself that enable these new terms and conditions to come forward?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Um, one idea that I liked in the book was a lot of ideas, but you talk about using joy as your North Star. So,
Mhm.
how do we use joy as our North Star?
Yeah, I believe that the mind can tell us all kinds of things, but our energy doesn't lie.
Yeah.
We know when we're doing things that give us life, and we know when we're doing things that suck us dry. Right. And I'm distinguishing, there's a good kind of tired that comes from purposeful effort. When you're doing work that's fulfilling and it's a job well done and you collapse on the couch and all you want to do is, rest or watch your favorite show. That's a great kind of tired because you've done something that's meaningful to you and you've done it well. And you get to celebrate and enjoy that, right? Which is different from being completely drained mentally, spiritually, and emotionally drained, where you don't feel that sense of hope, or you don't feel that sense of lightness. And so, what I tell people is that these are not always big leaps. Sometimes, even in the littlest things, you can begin to transform the amount of joy that you bring into your life, the amount of joy that you bring into your day to day. Right. And I use this example of my husband. He is a coffee drinker. And early in the morning, when he wakes up, he'll have his bath robe on. He hasn't combed his hair, maybe brushed his teeth, maybe not. But he stands and he looks out of a window. We have a front window in our kitchen. And he looks out of the window and for about 5 minutes, and he just enjoys his cold brew coffee. He calls it his cold brew moment. And then he goes on about the rest of his day. And he will say that the quality of his day is dramatically different on the mornings that he allows himself those 5 minutes
Yeah.
versus the mornings that he doesn't, right? And so it may, for many of us, need to just start there. Like, what is it in how we begin our day that enables joy and inspiration to come through
Yeah.
so that we meet the demands of the day with a smile as opposed to a scowl.
Yeah. Fantastic. We've got only got 4 minutes left till the end of the interview, and we did very briefly say we'd say something about money, didn't we? So we've probably got
Mm.
about a minute to talk about money. How, how important is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
scheme of things.
I want to say that this is about a mindset shift. And I want to name it this. And I talk about it, I promise you all, and I go deep around it in the book. So many of us have been conditioned to believe that we have to trade or we have to exchange. You either get happy or you get money. You either get fulfillment or you get money. You either get freedom or you get money. And so much of what our work at Move the Crowd has been founded in has been actually supporting people in discovering a path where they can have both. And so it begins with even believing that both are possible.
Mm.
And this comes back to the reclaiming, right? What are the new narratives? What are the new stories? What are the new opportunities where we can actually invite ourselves to believe that we can have fulfillment and we can have profitability in the same breath? As a matter of fact, I think true success requires it. In other words, the more that we are in alignment with our values, the more that we're in alignment with our talents and our gifts and our abilities, the more that we're in alignment with the things that we feel most passionate about wanting to contribute to in the world, the greater the probability and opportunity for success is, right? And so the first thing is to understand that we can have it. The second thing is to begin to look at who are the models, who are the people that inspire us around us. And if we're not finding people around us that inspire us, then there's the call to other communities, other environments where you can be surrounded and supported by people who believe as you believe, who share your vision for a better world or a better work environment, and begin to be in conversation and engagement with others who share that excitement and enthusiasm for life. And then it's about getting the skills, right? Which are about being in learning environments that enable you to discern how to work in alignment with those things that you're passionate about and build the skill and the resources and the relationships to
Excellent.
deliver on it.
Fantastic. And is this the movement that you've created?
This
Not
is
the
the core
shift.
of what our work is. Yes, stay true, get paid, do good.
Excellent. Well, on that note, it's been wonderful talking to you. I'm sure people have taken a lot from the conversation. Important to really take the time if you're in that feeling at the moment that it just isn't quite working, doesn't feel right. You may be in a machine that you're uncomfortable about being in, or you've hit the wall. A lot of us have been through that journey and experience, and I think most people are very accomplished, like Ra. Have been through that journey of rediscovery. And this book, Intentional Ambitions, is an opportunity to really think about that and start to plan your own journey, whatever stage you're at, with the help of experience of people who've already been through it, and maybe help to fast track that for you. So do check that out. And I'd also like to just point you to movethecrowd.me, which is Ra's site, website, and you can have a look at that and find out more about the movement and about the book and about the work. Also, if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you at chris@chriscooper.co.uk. And on next week's show, I have Ted Scambos. And Ted is a senior research scientist at the University of Colorado's Earth Science Observation. And he's probably visited Antarctica more than anybody else on the planet. I think he's been something like 22 times on expeditions. And so he really understands what's going on and has some amazing perspectives on all sorts of things, not just the climate. So I loved talking to him a few weeks ago. So I'm going to have a fascinating interview next week with Ted, and we'll be talking about the climate and in the real perspective, what's really going on, and learning from some of his insights and wisdom. So do take care, everybody. Do go away and reflect on this. And the important thing is that we do find that joy and that freedom and that fulfillment through our work. And if we can do that, we'll be inspired to go and make a real difference, wherever that might be, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your community, whether it's on a bigger scale. But I think that's important. Find work that is meaningful, that delivers you an income, so you can have a sustainable life. But go and make good matter. Go and make a difference.